Yes, I'm still doing this. Hey, Graham Pickles here. Been a few months between episode 3 and 4, but work has been a little, but it's fine now. It's fine. So August came, August went, and I realized I haven't done anything. Panic has started to creep in, but we might still be okay. I know I wanted dreary weather, which in Scotland's pretty much all the time, am I right? So originally October, November looked pretty good, but yeah, January, February could work. There's still time. There's still time. So, I've covered the initial idea, fleshed out the bare bones of a concept and story, chatted a bit about the camera, rather clumsily. Now, let's talk the fun stuff. And this is what it's really all about for me. The monster. I love monsters. Ever since I was a wee bairn, honestly, my mum hated it. She was always like,
"Why can't you draw anything nice?"
Truth be told, I actually really miss monsters. I feel like we just don't get them like we used to. At least not in the West. Anime is full of unique and wonderful abominations. Back in the day, there were weird freaks coming out every week. I loved how you had these creatures that were just thrown together quite cheaply and crudely, and then all the actors and the stories around them would take them so seriously. It was an innocent time, and people actually found this scary. I think this trend lasted all the way up till the 80s, and then there was a dip. Standouts in the last 20 years? Guillermo del Toro? I'm not like a massive fan of all of his films, but you can't deny this guy's on a whole other level of fairy tale horror. I remember Hellboy 2's Troll Market scene. It was an absolute feast for the eyes. Spoiler alert for my next two references, skip ahead to this time. The Ritual, which I think is on Netflix, revealed a forest god entity, which was quite beautiful and bizarre. Attack the Block had some interesting aliens. And Nicolas Cage's very recent Arcadian had some, well, like most Nicolas Cage films, you'll have to see it to believe it. And The Quiet Place aliens made a big splash with mainstream audiences. I mean, they were really cool, but something about them weren't iconic enough for me. I mean, they kind of reminded me of xenomorphs. One more little recommendation from me would be Netflix's Love and Monsters. Honestly felt like a homage to the 50s giant animal roster. Not the most unique designs in the world, sure, but it's a charming wee film that's been completely overlooked. So I talk big talk, but what kind of hellhound can I dream up? Well, I won't go super crazy just for the sake of it. The story will help me design the monster. So 1, I want something that feels like it's from old Scottish folklore. 2, I want it to feel like it should feasibly be able to exist in nature, so not overly magical or alien to this world. Oh, and lastly, realistic on a tiny budget. So for that first point, most monsters of folklore are just an amalgamation of different animals, chimera, if you will. If we start a little closer to home, to Scottish mythology, then we have to begin with the Kelpie. Shape-shifting water spirits found near lakes, commonly taking the form of a horse. Malicious in nature, these demons would lure humans into approaching them. Upon any physical contact, you would be fastened to their hide and dragged down to the watery depths. I mean, it's a horse, so nothing crazy to look at there. But in Aberdonian versions, its mane was to be made of snakes. Yeah. And these beasts have made quite a cultural impact here. Not far from my parents' house are these magnificent structures rearing out of the ground. Pretty cool place to walk around and see up close. Next up, we have the Ech Ushke. The Ech Ushke? A creature capable of changing form, often disguised as a horse or a pony. Passive when on land, but when near water, the Ech usage skin becomes adhesive and the creature plunges into the dark depths, drowning and devouring their victims. Kinda like a Kelpie then. And of course, who could forget the Boobray? a mythical shapeshifter that inhabits the lochs on the west coast of Scotland. It commonly appears as a gigantic water bird, although some claim to have seen it take the form of a horse. Oh Christ. Why were the Scottish so scared of horses? I'm not kidding, the research I underwent for this video was pretty disappointing. I mean, other than horses, we have some goblins and selkies, which, if you were wondering, I know werewolves sound scary, but our guys, they turn into seals. I know, real haunting stuff. There was one that caught my eye, said to be the most terrifying beast of our entire mythology. The Knuckleavy, a skinless horror of the Northern Islands. With its fiery breath of damnation, it is said to be responsible for the destruction of crops and livestock across Scotland. Orkney residents wouldn't even say its name without frantically praying afterwards, taking the nightmarish form of half man, half horse. It was at this point I realised, why try to cram a monster from pre-existing mythology into my story if it didn't fit, or isn't a horse? So, to the drawing board. An important thing to remember about old monsters is they weren't just there to simply terrify people. They were often there to personify natural disasters, offer a kind of old-timey explanation, or teach little boys and girls to behave. I mean, the whole point of the Kelpie myth was to scare kids from approaching wild horses, which apparently is a big problem in Scotland. So what's the purpose of my monster? What's the lesson? I mean, it was a mix of that story I said in a previous episode about being stalked by this black cat and being completely unaware of it because I wasn't paying attention. But I did have a conversation with my wife. It was actually about a murder that happened down south. And she said, "What, are we not safe now to walk the streets?" And it kind of made me think. I was like, oh, do we all presume to be safe now? I mean, even when walking streets or walking anywhere? I mean, at the end of the day, we're still animals, and we're always in the wild. Dangers are everywhere. The worst thing you can do is drop your guard and presume your own safety. So our beast preys on those who are not paying attention, who take for granted their security and don't heed the wild around them, too plugged into whatever technology we distract ourselves with. So how does that affect the design? As a hunter, he needed a carnivore's body. We don't have bears here anymore. So I went for a kind of monstrous hound. I wanted him to have long, lanky arms and big hands for snatching you up quickly. And in contrast to us, deaf and blind humans, he would have his senses turned up to 11. So enormous eyes which dart around independently like a lizard. You can't see it here, but his lids would probably slide over his eyeballs like a chameleon. Big snout for sniffing out his prey, and an enormous tongue which can taste the particles in the air like a snake. His ears are the defining part, huge and bat-like, can hear the slightest sound. But how does he work? What are the rules? Well, with all these overloaded senses, he's actually very easy to spook. He's skittish and jumpy. If you look at him too quick, he'll run away in fear, he'll get a fright. If you clap your hands, he'll fall backward, which is precisely why he stalks those who don't pay attention. I think it fits the folkloric inbuilt lesson pretty well. And because he's so particular about his meals, he's always starving, emaciated, drooling and desperate. Quite enjoy drawing anatomy, which is unnaturally twisted, having the muscle and sinew and skin just kind of wrapped clumsily around the bone. It's pretty ugly. I kind of wanted to draw his face as being scary, yeah, but also kind of scared himself. He's kind of reaching tentatively towards this thing that might make him jump. I wanted his fur to be black as night for hiding in shadows. And yeah, we have a pretty nightmarish monster coming together. Now we just need a name, and not something lame like the Night Stalker. Trying to sound cool is just lame and forgettable. Looking back at the Scottish monster list, it needs to sound old and a little provincial, like a drunk farmer has run back to the pub and trying to describe what he saw. So I looked up some old Scots and simply described my monster. So my first idea was the Lank, meaning tall and thin. Really simple and quite universally understood. You probably know what it looks like from that one word alone. But it was too general. You could call the Slender Man the Lank. So it's not ownable, not very standout. Second idea, the Crouchy, meaning crooked back. Again, nice and simple, sounds really Scottish and describes his hunched appearance. But again, it's just too broad. It made me think of the Crooked Man story. So then I thought, let's get a bit sillier. The scroggy shank, meaning bushy legs. Sounds kind of silly, but this is definitely along the right lines. I want it to feel weird and unique. However, as much as I like these words, you wouldn't look at this monster and think, oof, check them bushy legs. Okay, how about the Crowlin' Murk, meaning creepy, deformed darkness. Close silver place for this one. To think of this gnarled, misshapen dark creature is awesome, but I felt I could be more specific, and I think this is the winner for me. The Muckleboggy, meaning the great bat. I was definitely inspired by a bat's head when drawing this. Animals that come out of night, have impeccable senses. I can imagine a victim fleeing this after only seeing its head in the darkness and presume it's a giant bat, so the lore makes sense. I was definitely inspired by The Babadook, which was an Australian horror film, and I remember being just completely entranced by the fairy tale nature of the art style, but also the name itself. It was like, what is that? I'm hoping such a strange name like the Muckleboggy will do the same for me. Anyway, monster made, myth made. I could go on about monsters and fairy tales and stories all night, but this video has been a long one, so ciao the now.
You gotta just go for it. Don't think about what comes after or what came before. You just gotta bend your knees, take a deep breath, and jump. And you might think, what if I fall? Well, what if you don't? What if you fly?